Hi on, in this video I'm going to show you guys a complete walkthrough to use render catch in DaVinci Resolve. First of all, if you don't know what render catch is a catching process in DaVinci Resolve which will improve DaVinci Resolve's performance. It will mainly improve two types of performance in DaVinci Resolve. First one is the playback performance. That is, after adding a color grade or fusion effect to a clip, if we enable a render catch, we can play that clip without any lag. Second one is that it will improve the delivery speed of the project. That is, while rendering the project, if we use the render catch, we can improve the delivery speed of the project. And this render catch is represented in the timeline with a red bar, and this red bar will turn to blue when the catching process is completed. And about this video, first of all, we will look at all the settings available for render catch. Second, we will look at the type of render catch available. Lastly, we will look at way to manage this render catch. First of all, about the render catch settings. Render catch settings is provided under project settings. So individual project can have individual render catch settings. First of all, about the resolution of render catch output, it is a necessary info that you want to keep in your mind if you are using render catch output in your project render. The resolution used by the render catch output is timeline resolution, and if the timeline resolution and the project output resolution is different, then you won't get the benefit of a render catch while rendering your project. Also, if you are a person who changes the timeline resolution to a lower one to improve the performance of DaVinci Resolve and you are using this render catch, then while you change the timeline resolution to the original resolution, then this render catch will re-render the entire project. So it will be a time consuming process if you are not planned on how to use this render catch. Next, about the format used by render catch output. In your DaVinci Resolve project settings, master settings, there will be an option to change the format of a render catch output. And mainly you can find three options under there. First one is the uncompressed, second one is the DNX HR, and lastly we got the GoPro Cineform, and all these format got their own versions for 8-bit or 10-bit footage. And for the uncompressed and GoPro Cineform, if your footage is 8-bit, you can still use the 10-bit output format. Before I discuss more about this format, there is one thing that you want to keep in mind. It does not matter which format you use, because we are not using this format to edit the footage. We are still applying all the color grade and all the fusion effect to our original footage only. Then after applying the grade and effects, we are rendering the footage to the format we selected. So basically, this format does not matter that much for the quality of your output. And also all this format is uncompressed format, so the quality difference between all these three formats will not be that big. But the thing with this format is that depending on the format that you selected, the time taken to complete this render catch as well as the storage space consumed by this render catch will be different. So if you are thinking which is the best render catch format, here is my result of comparing these three render catch on a 15-second project which got 8-bit footage, and all these footage is color graded as well as there is lot of fusion effect on that project. GoPro Cineform takes less time compared to both DNX HR and uncompressed. It is around 1 minute faster compared to both, and this DNX HR and uncompressed took around same time. And about the storage consumed, GoPro Cineform took less space compared to DNX HR, and DNX HR took less space compared to uncompressed. Uncompressed is the one which consumed big space. It consumed around 18 gigs for a 15-second footage. And the thing to note is that if your footage is around 1 GB, then the render catch will be more than 10 GB, because all the render catch format is uncompressed version. So the space consumed by these render cache will be very big. Next we got 4 tick boxes for the render cache settings. But before we discuss about these 4 boxes, let's look at the 2 modes available for render cache because it is a necessary info if you want to know more about these 4 tick boxes. Basically, render cache provide 2 mode. First one is the smart mode, which will enable a render cache for the entire clip on the project timeline, and second one is the user mode where we can control the render cache. That is, we can enable render cache for particular clip and we can disable render cache for particular clip, so we get more controls on the user mode. So back to the 4 tick boxes. First one is the enable background caching after number of seconds, and we can change this second. And if we enable these settings and we enable a render cache on DaVinci Resolve project, then DaVinci Resolve will automatically start the caching process after we idle the DaVinci Resolve for the number of seconds we choose. That is, if we choose 5 seconds, after 5 seconds of idle time on DaVinci Resolve, it will start the caching process. And if we untick this box, then DaVinci Resolve will only start caching process when we play the clip. This option is same for both smart mode and user mode. Other 3 options in this render cache is only for user mode. Like I mentioned, in user mode we need to enable which clip to use render cache or not. But by ticking these 3 boxes, we can automatically enable caching process for all the transition we added to the clip, all the composite clip on the timeline, and all the fusion clips on the timeline. So we don't need to individually enable caching for these 3 things. And depending on your project, these 3 options will be a very time saving options. Next settings available for the render cache is the file location where you want to save the render cache. It is available under project settings, master settings, working folder, cache file location. Basically, when you are setting the location, make sure that the location got lot of free space because render cache consume lot of space, and the space is fast enough to handle the render cache. If the location you are using for render cache is not fast enough, then your DaVinci Resolve may hang, and the process of creating this render cache will be a very time consuming process because you are creating this render cache on a slow location. Lastly, if the storage is not fast enough, sometimes on the rendered cache output there will be some frames with the media offline tag. So when you are selecting the location, make sure it got a lot of space and it is fast enough to handle the render cache. Next is the mode available for a render cache. Like I mentioned, there is 2 mode. First one is the smart mode and second one is the user mode. You can find this option under playback, render cache, none, smart and user. Smart mode will enable render cache for all the files on your timeline, and smart mode will enable a render cache for both color edit as well as fusion effect. If you are using user mode in DaVinci Resolve, we need to manually enable render cache for individual clip in the timeline. For this, DaVinci Resolve provide 2 options: render cache for color output, render cache for fusion output. Render cache for color output will create a render cache for color output, that is for the color grade. And if your footage got only fusion effect, then you need to only enable the render cache for fusion output. To find this option on DaVinci Resolve timeline, select the clip, right click the clip and you can find this option, that is render cache for fusion and render cache for color output. And in fusion output there is 3 options: auto, on and off. Auto option means it will use the project settings, that is the tick boxes found under project settings, master settings. On means it will enable the render cache for fusion output, and off means it will just disable this render cache for fusion output. And to manage the render cache, we can delete the render cache from playback, delete render cache option, and there will be 3 options. Either we can delete the render cache for the entire project, or we can delete the render cache not used by the project And lastly, we can delete the render cache for the selected clips. And for the first two options, you can directly do that from playback, delete a render cache, and by selecting those two options. And for deleting the render cache of selected clip, first of all, on the timeline, select the clip that you want to delete the render cache of, and after that, head over to playback, delete render cache, and choose selected clips. It's going to delete the render cache. And to manually delete the render cache, head out to the cache file location, which can be found under project settings, master settings, working folder, cache file location. So open that folder and you can delete this folder to delete the render cache. And to identify which folder is which project, just open that folder and check the info.txt file, and inside that text file you can see the project name, and you can delete that entire folder to delete the render cache. And to make this thing easier, just download this folder size application. What this application do is that it will show the space consumed by each folder on a location. So if you open the cache folder, it will show the space consumed by each folder. Based off that, you can navigate which folder contain the render cache and which folder does not contain the render cache, and open the folder which contain render cache, find that this render cache is needed or not, and delete that render cache easily. Sadly, we can't manually delete the render cache for individual clip because all the file name is some random numbers and all the file is saved as .dvcc file which can't be played. So we won't know which clip each folder represent. So we can't manually delete individual render cache file. To use the render cache on your project output, on your deliver page, output settings, advanced settings, there will be a checkbox which marked as use render cache images. Just check that mark and it's going to use this render cache to render out the project, and it will be very faster compared to not using the render cache. So that's it. That's all about the render cache in DaVinci Resolve. I hope you guys find this video useful. If you do so, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe.